Good evening and welcome to another episode of Wanderlust Wednesdays. This is a really special one because I'm joined by our core members of the expedition team, the people that are now working ahead of the maiden voyage of the Viking Octantis early next year. And I will introduce everyone. Ask some questions. It's really a stellar lineup. I'm always very impressed when I get to spend time with these people. We have Lawton from Canada, who takes care of our Great Lakes product, but a lot of other things. We have Damon Stanwell-Smith, Dr. Damon Stanwell-Smith, who is the head of our science, the entire science program that we run, which is better than anyone else in the industry. We have Jørn, who heads the expedition team, and finally we have Nikki de Sousa, who is new. You've seen all these gentlemen already on Viking.TV before, and if you like what you see tonight, you can go into our back catalog and find what other things Aaron and Damon and Jørn have talked about. But Nikki is new to this lineup. Nikki, can you briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, hello, thank you, Joost, and hello, everyone. So this is my first time on Viking TV, obviously. My name is Nikki, as Joost was saying, and I'll be the expedition leader on board the Octantis, so very excited about that role. I've been on board ships for over 20 years now in various regions of the world as expedition leader, and in Antarctica many, many times.
Jørn told me that the first time that he talked about you, he said she has been to places that Google doesn't even know where to find. So, Nikki, as you said, you're slated to be the expedition leader that will take the Octantis out for its first sailing in Antarctica. Can you explain a little bit about your role on these voyages?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, Antarctica, as you are probably aware of, is such a bucket destination for so many people. It's a dream destination. People are waiting for years and years to come down to Antarctica. And obviously, a lot of people have seen images, and we are there to make that dream come true for them. So this is basically the role that we're having. We are putting together an itinerary together with the captain and members of the team that will incorporate what we figure is, with the weather situation, the current prevailing weather situation, the best sites that we can give to our guests to give the most amount of wildlife sightings, of course, and the most varied wildlife sightings. Antarctica is complex in the operation due to the changing weather patterns, so flexibility on both ends is really one of the main keys for the guests as well as for us. We do change our plans frequently. We've got a main plan that we like to do. We look at that before the voyage one more time. We check the weather patterns, and together with the captain, we sit together and we might just change that plan altogether. And then as we're into the cruise day by day, we'll be updating that for us as well and changing the itinerary in order to accommodate the conditions that are prevailing. With that, we do have a fantastic team of specialists on board that we're obviously organizing. So a lot of it is organization on board of the ship, in order to give people the maximum amount of information before they get ashore, and to answer any questions that they might have of the behavior of the animals or what they might have seen ashore as well. So it's a really rounded way of looking at things, and we're a big team to accomplish that with a lot of expertise, and really looking forward to going down there again.
Excellent. So flexibility is a key, but people can rest assured that irrespective of how much or how little their itinerary gets jumbled up, they're still going to have a phenomenal time.
Oh yeah, there are no ugly sights in Antarctica. I mean, when you take away, I always say, when you take away the wildlife, if you would just look at the landscape itself, it's just so mind-boggling. Everything is bigger and on a grander scale than anywhere else in the world. So And even those days with bad weather, it just brings home the reality of where we are, which is one of the most remote areas in the entire world. So even, a bad weather day just brings home the Antarctic experience.
But just to make sure, you're not really taking the wildlife away, right?
Oh, no.
There are going to be penguins.
There are going to be cute penguins everywhere.
Just got to make sure there's going to be penguins. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think before I ask Jørn a question, it's time to have a look at where the ship is, literally where it is geographically, but also where it is in the development. Obviously, there's an awful lot that goes into building a stellar expedition ship, and James has queued up a video. This is a world premiere. We literally have not used this video anywhere else, and so you have the world premiere of the latest and greatest Viking Octantis update video.
Creating an expedition ship worthy of the Viking name is no small endeavour, especially when our award-winning ocean and river fleet have set such high standards. When designing vessels to bring our guests to the ends of the earth and back, every part of the ship operations and guest experience has to be carefully considered. And every step of the way guided by our chairman, Torstein Hagen, whose attention to detail is second to none. To optimize safety, comfort, and guest flow, the design process was, as usual, an ongoing collaboration of many people, involving our maritime architects, interior designers, and all key departments at Viking. It's a global effort, tapping the expertise and experience of our nautical and technical staff, expedition leaders, enrichment officers, food and beverage, and hotel operations. The goal? To ensure that when our guests set off to explore the world with us, they'll enjoy the same onboard ambiance and our commitment to learning and discovery that's long distinguished Viking from others. Construction begins with the ceremonial first cutting of steel at the shipyard. The next major milestone is the keel laying. This marks the initial joining of modular components. It's celebrated with an age-old tradition and a coin from the ship's owner. The coin is meant to bring good fortune when it's welded to the vessel. This is recognized as the moment the ship comes to life. What follows is nothing short of remarkable. After months of shaping and fitting steel, our innovative expedition ship is moved to a submersible platform, so she can touch water for the very first time. This centuries-old process is known as the float-out. It's a methodical undertaking that takes nearly 2 full days to complete. From stem to stern, every joint, weld, and system are thoroughly checked to ensure everything is ready for the next step in the process of building our expedition ship. And that step is a big one. We actually move the hull from the European shipyard all the way to Norway for completion. This fascinating journey begins with powerful tugs gently guiding the hull down a narrow channel through the Danube Delta. It's a challenging start to the 21-day, 7,765-kilometer voyage. Along this slender waterway, there's simply no room for error, as our expedition ship makes its way toward the first significant milestone: the open, mythical waters of the Black Sea. Then it's on to the historic Bosphorus Strait, and the challenge of navigating through one of the world's busiest channels. As the ship passes through legendary Istanbul, past the Byzantine-era Maiden's Tower, the fabled Blue Mosque and Hagia Sophia, headed for the Mediterranean and extraordinary Malta, where just off the coast, our first expedition ship, the Viking Octantis, marked the occasion with something very special, just past dawn. Her two ocean sisters, the Viking Star and the Viking Sea, sailed in perfect convoy a few hours in the Ionian Sea. Our first two ocean ships welcoming the Viking Octantis to the Viking family, while giving Chairman Torstein Hagen, myself and the rest of the expeditions team, including my Labrador Finse, who has the aft terrace named after her, a chance to observe the ship underway. It was a monumental moment, and one for the Viking history books. A glimpse at the exciting future ahead. But the journey is far from complete. The hull next rounds iconic Gibraltar, then sails up the North Atlantic, through the English Channel and the North Sea before reaching Norway, where the hull of our first expedition ship spends the next 9 months in the protected harbour of Sørvik, where she undergoes what is known as outfitting. This is a very large undertaking, as every area of the ship must be completed, checked, then reviewed again to ensure everything matches design specifications. Off-ship expedition equipment is also thoroughly readied for the adventures that lie ahead. Equally important is the feel inside our ships, and our trusted art advisor, who's helped us build one of the most significant Nordic art collections in the world, is overseeing the artwork on the expedition ships as well, with input from the ship's godmother, one of the world's greatest explorers, Liv Arnesen, who knows more about the Arctic region and Antarctica, as well as the Great Lakes, than almost anyone alive. Finse was also present here, and perhaps next time Liv and Finse meet will be on the beautiful Finse Terrace when we take formal delivery of our first expedition ship, the Viking Octantis, at the end of this year. Viking is setting a new standard, and our expedition vessel will soon be ready to take on the demands of our extraordinary voyages in the far reaches of our world.
Jørn, in the video and also online and in some of the other material we have, we show some of the smaller vessels we have on the ship that we use to explore. And can you tell us a little bit more about how you get to pick this particular Zodiac, this particular rib? What goes into selecting just the right equipment?
Sure. First of all, I'd like to say that the mothership is the most important craft in our flotilla of crafts, because we're really talking about almost 40 different crafts, individual watercrafts, boats, with one expedition ship. And our fleet consists of 17 Zodiacs. It consists of 16 kayaks, and it consists of 2 ribs. And I'll start with the Zodiacs, and I'll explain a little bit about our rationale for picking what we've picked, how we have modified it, and how we have landed on our selection. So you see the first image here is actually in the Oslo Fjord in Norway, where our supplier is situated of the Zodiacs. They are American built. They are custom built, and they're from a brand called Milpro, which is the military range, industrial range from the brand Zodiac, which has become the benchmark for landing crafts or small auxiliary crafts from expedition ships. And though this is not an off-the-shelf product, it is strengthened, and it has a double layer of hypalon, which is the fabric, the rubber in this inflatable boat is a rubber called hypalon, which is essentially a multi-layered fabric that makes it very safe and very sturdy. We can take this boat up on the beach, drag it up the beach, and land it on dry land without it getting damaged or losing integration. They're also very safe boats. They have seven different and individually enclosed air chambers, so there is a full redundancy in the boat, and they are very, very well tried and tested in Antarctic waters. So they can take a hit on a small little iceberg, they can take sharp edges, and they are light and they're agile. And this is the craft that is supposed to give you as a guest the experience of being close to the water, right on the water line, and you're going to look over the side, and sometimes you're going to see penguins flying through the water. You're maybe going to see a whale, you're going to see a seal, and it's really just a different experience getting so close to the environment or to the element, the ocean, as you get in the Zodiac. And the Zodiac was really pioneered by the early pioneer divers like Cousteau, and this is a further development now used by special forces around the world and so on. So it's a very well tried and tested system, and we are outfitting these boats with radar reflectors, AIS systems. So whenever we have a number of these, I said it was 17 inside the expedition ship, there is a big screen on the bridge where the captain will have an overview of the exact position of each and every boat. And the captain will be able to ping and communicate with each boat individually. And we will have a perfect real-time overview of how this fleet of small boats is operating off the mothership. So integration, agility, lightness, sturdiness, safety are all elements that were chosen. This is from the workshop where these boats were assembled, and they're all now sitting in a warehouse next to our expedition ship in Zodiacs, Norway, ready to be uploaded into our hangar, which is specially made to hold these crafts in the mothership in Viking Octantis. So next picture is also from the hangar. We've chosen an engine from a company called Yanmar, and they have a D-torque, so it's a high torque engine. And if you remember back to the first picture when we did the sea trials, we were actually verifying, amongst other things, that the supplier had delivered according to specifications, but we were also testing a number of different propeller designs, essentially to figure out what kind of propeller is the best propeller to have on this boat with the load of X number of people. How fast this is going into plane, what is the acceleration, how sturdy is it, can it take hits from small pieces of ice, and so on. So we have put a lot of effort into making the Zodiac, which is a hallmark of expedition cruising really, and taking that from being an off-the-shelf product and making it into the custom Viking Expedition Zodiac that we believe is going to be a very, very well serving crafts for many years to come in our fleet. The next craft we want to present to you here is the Rib. Our expedition ship, at the stern, we have something called the hangar, and to be honest, the inspiration calling it the hangar is also like a navy expression, is a military expression, and we have a large space at the very stern of the ship where we have a big shell door at the very stern that can open, and through that shell door there will be extended a slipway, and we will be able to upload and embark the ribs inside the ship. These boats that are about almost 30, approximately 30 feet long, They will hold 12 persons in the individually suspended, hydraulically suspended, super comfortable seats. They have a relatively high weight, and that's because they are strengthened, and they're based on a model from Finnish supplier that is usually only delivering to governmental customers like navies and special forces. So the whole hull of the rib is based on a hull that is actually designed to be deployed from the air in parachutes, dropped from the air, land on the surface, and then keep operating. So it's a very well-structured and sturdy aluminum hull. It has a pontoon that is actually not filled with air. It's a foam inside that pontoon to retain its integrity no matter what hits it. And it has a redundancy of 2 separate propulsion systems. So it has 2 engines and it has 2 water jets. And those 2 inboard engines are there because it's the best and most easy engine system to maintain and keep operational at any one time. It's also a convertible. As you see here now, the roof is off, and it's a total open boat except for the pilot position and the guide position, which is right in the front. There's a loudspeaker system. We can do guiding from it. It's ample space on deck, and especially on the stern, where you can climb up and stand on behind the railing on the stern. We have 2 individual life rafts that can hold a much larger amount of people than we have in the boat. And it's extremely maneuverable due to the water jet system that we have. And I think it's important, if you switch image, James, to the next one, which is the boat in its construction in the workshop in Finland where we make it. This is where we have the roof on. And there's a reason we have specified the boat to have a sort of a convertible capability. Because we will also have sides and we're having the capability of enclosing the cabin all together so that all the guests are 100% protected from external weather and the environment if needed. I believe most of the time we're going to have it in a relatively open configuration whilst operating. However, we do have the possibility to rapidly close the boat to protect guests and pilots from the environment if needed. They're extremely sturdy boats. This is one of these boats that you can drive from Miami to Halifax with along the coast, and then continue up to Newfoundland and up the Labrador coast, ending up in Canadian Arctic, really. So it is an ocean-going boat with a very high capability, and it's also important to mention that we will not run this at full speed. It will be guided tours. We're being in the environment and doing sightseeing, stopping wherever we like. If we see wildlife, we'll sit there and we will rotate around icebergs and so on. It's not ocean rafting. We're not hitting waves and doing full speed operations with these, because we want to keep it at a very reasonable and super comfortable level for whoever is joining us. I also like to mention that every individual seat we can take out of the boat. So say if someone is on board the ship and requires a little bit more deck space, for any reason whatsoever, it's possible, for example, to roll a wheelchair directly onto the boat and then be launched out of the mothership and have a grand experience on the water and close to the elements. And really, this is what we internally call the unique selling point. We don't know anyone that has fitted an expedition ship with a similar craft with those capabilities. So I hope that was an okay answer. And I have a little bit at the end. The last image I want to show is of the Kayak. And this is from the American brand Hobie. Most known for their Hobie cats, the double-hulled sailing boats that are really fast and agile. They have a line of kayaks, or pedal kayaks. As you can see here in the front, the guest in the front, she has her feet in pedals, and it's like one of these old-fashioned organs. You just push back and forth with your legs, and underneath the boat there's a propulsion system based on the design of penguin flippers, in fact. So there are two flippers going like this underneath the kayak, and it's unbelievably efficient and will propel you with a much lower investment in energy at a much faster pace than, say, a new or a kayak paddler with an oar. So we also opted for these kayaks because they have a very, very high build quality, and it leaves your hands free. As you can see here, we will use our binoculars to look for wildlife, and you can still move very silent and stealthy across the surface, keep your hands free, and you're sitting on top in very comfortable chairs. So these boats have what we call a very high primary stability. So by no means you can stand up, you can stand on the side of the boat, which we don't recommend in normal operations, but you can do that in order to test the stability of the boat. It's very, very safe and stable. So that's the reason we chose that particular kayak.
Okay, Jørn, thank you. I repeat, you must not stand up on the kayak and test its stability. That is really just for the experts. Don't try this at home, and don't try this when you're a guest on a Viking ship. Aaron, one of the things that you work on is the Great Lakes, and I know that you, in your younger and wilder years, you spent some summers in Killarney, Ontario. Now, on the Great Lakes, we visit some larger cities, and there our programming is quite similar to what you would find in an ocean port. We have shore excursions that you can pick from and do various different things. And then we have these days where the ship is virtually in the wilderness. And can you describe a little bit what you have designed for those kind of days?
Yes, I can. I don't know if I can keep it do it in a little bit in a short form, because I am excited about those days. That really takes us into the essence of expedition cruising on that day. We'll stop the ship. You'll wake up in the morning. We'll be at anchor. There might be a small community nearby that we can take you into, but really the experience is everything around the ship. We have a lot of the tools on the ship. Jørn's just covered the tools, the Zodiacs, the ribs, the kayaks, on occasion the submarines as well. We've got all the tools, and then we've got a large team of experts, local experts, visiting experts, but our team that really knows our equipment and knows how to share the area with you. On some of these days, and thinking about Killarney, you're right, I spent some wild days in Killarney and running an outfitting business there, and doing a lot of guiding on Georgian Bay, sea kayak guiding and canoe guiding around Georgian Bay. In that place, we'll stop, we'll put Zodiacs down, we'll drop some kayaks off on an island, and then we'll have a shuttle, and we can Zodiac some of you who want to kayak over to the kayaks. You can go off and paddle in that direction. We can take the ribs will go on a cruise out into one of the bays near Killarney, do some sightseeing. The Zodiacs will take you into town, or even the tenders might go on the water and take you into the town for a visit to the historic Killarney Mountain Lodge in Killarney, for example, or in other communities. Take us into the community where we'll interact with locals in the community, local guides to take us to some of the highlights. we've already started communicating with some of the local birders in the region to get information on the hot spots, and already talked them into meeting us when we're there to guide a birding walk in that area, or local photographers to share information with you as we visit. Over the course of the day, we'll have a lot of activities that you can do. You could hike in the morning, you could kayak in the afternoon, or vice versa. You can do as much as you want or as little as you want. And any time you finish an activity, we'll have boats ready to take you back to the ship or to take you to the next activity. Flexibility, Nikki introduced that idea of flexibility in the very first moment, and she hasn't grimaced yet when I've talked about that day in Killarney, which she'll have to deliver as expedition leader. It's really is the key to the game. You let us know what we'll tell you what's happening the next day, and then as the day unfolds, you let us know how we can meet your desires in that place. Those are those days. Those are the special days of expedition cruising. Those days we park the ship.
Excellent, and I'm surprised at how short you kept it. And I may have just interrupted you at a moment that was opportune. I don't know, but I'd like to move on, because we also on board, we do an awful lot to support what you do on shore. We do refer to ourselves, and we're quite proud of that. And it's become such a cornerstone of the experience. We offer you the thinking man's expedition, and our own resident thinking man is Dr. Damon Stanwell-Smith. And can you describe, Damon, what makes our science program that supports all the stuff that goes on outside so unique?
Yes, certainly. And hello, everybody. It's lovely to be back on Viking TV. Thank you, Joost, for the intro. I'm not sure I'm always thinking. And as just a preamble, all the previous Viking TV conversations have been with you from Cambridge in the UK. And you'll see here that I am actually in Basel in Switzerland at the moment. So I'm excited about the travel as well. Regarding uniqueness, I wanted to maybe build on what Jørn was describing to start with and cover just 6 building blocks of our science program, and then talk about who is delivering, and then reflect on what it is to be unique. So the 6 building blocks. Number 1 is our ships have wet laboratories, wet labs. Now that sounds very simple, but putting a wet lab on a ship is a much more complicated thing to do than you first imagine. And from a guest point of view, we'll be able to interact with the marine world in a way that if you don't have a dedicated space, which ours are nearly 400 square feet, with fully outfitted laboratory, it's simply bringing a bucket aboard and trying to bring it into a cabin or the galley or onto the marina deck or something on other vessels. It's very challenging. You need a dedicated space. And so number 1, our wet lab, and so we'll build a picture here and then we'll look at the more than the sum of the parts. Secondly, we have a suite of oceanographic instruments that'll be sampling constantly a whole range of parameters of the oceans as we're traveling through. And I think that will provide a really interesting understanding of the seas we travel through. And for those, especially of our guests that are particularly interested in the marine sphere, I think we'll be able to delve as deep, figuratively and literally, into marine science as our guests would like. This includes microplastic analysis. We have a sophisticated microplastic analysis automated process, which also involves some laboratory work as well for those that are interested in understanding some of the challenges facing the modern world. Next, Jørn mentioned the 2 ribs, and I share the excitement about having such capable vessels, offshore vessels, on an expedition ship, which is unprecedented. One of the 2 ribs on each of the ships is designated a survey rib. And that means that we will have a state-of-the-art multi-beam sonar built in. This is literally the same equipment that is used by cartographic bodies that make charts and is a very key tool for understanding the seabed by researchers, and I'll cover that in a moment. The next thing is that we have submersibles. We're going to talk a little bit more about submersibles later in this chat, but having submersibles when you're in remote places is, as it's often said, that we know more about the moon than we do about the deep oceans. And having submersibles that will be providing guests the opportunity to dive down and see extraordinary things underwater, every time that we do a dive, there is a chance of genuinely finding something new to science. And we'll be recording that with cameras. There's a camera that will be doing sort of, if you like, scientific sampling on board. And there's also a manipulator arm on the front of the sub as well, each sub. But so these are the next building block. The fifth building block is that we have worked with one of our partners, NOAA, the National Weather Service in the US, and we have built and we have been invited by NOAA to build a weather balloon station on each of our two ships. We become weather stations 103 and 104, I believe, of the global network that the US National Weather Service use. And we'll be doing regular weather balloon releases, which our guests will be able to participate and see the balloons going up to over 70,000 feet and profiling the atmosphere. And we're excited by that. We're honored to be able to collaborate with NOAA on this. And I think that both the scientific rigor and also the theatre and the excitement of actually participating in global weather predictions of a given day, we hope will be a unique experience. And then number 6 is the ship itself. Jørn eloquently described with enthusiastic points some of the elements, and we saw from our towing what a beautiful vessel and vessel class we're building. But the ship itself is designed in order to be an optimal viewing platform. And a lot of science is simply observational. So every single stateroom has a Nordic balcony device, a plate glass window that can open up with a sort of like a sash window, turning the entire ship into an observation platform, which I, as a wildlife watcher, this is a very exciting and gentle and calm and serene way to see wildlife from the ship itself. We've worked with one of our partners, Cornell Lab of Ornithology, on this to make sure that it is optimized as both a bird platform, but more broadly as a wildlife platform. And that's, if you like, the 6th big building block. And if we talk about the picture now, about why the uniqueness that Joost mentioned, is that we can have all the tools, but from a guest experience, we need also to have the rigor of the science as well. And so we have, I'm not going to exhaustively go through, we have a broad suite of partners, but 3 that jump out. I mentioned NOAA, the federal agency, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, specifically the Great Lakes Environmental Research Laboratory, but also more broadly across NOAA as well. We have a lead partner institution of Cambridge University, specifically the Scott Polar Research Institute, but again, more broadly Cambridge University as well. And then thirdly, Cornell, specifically the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And there's others too. But if we were to take those 3 institutions, for example, the synergy between the researchers that they have, and they will be sending researchers to come and join us, working with the tools that I've just described, to me paint an extraordinary picture, an opportunity to do amazing science. And then if we talk about uniqueness, when I was thinking about how do we say, what is unique? For me, what is unique is that we, as a marine scientist, it is the ultimate expression of a Viking staple, for those of you that have sailed with us before, of the principle of being in the working world. Now, I, in my career, all the way through up to now, have never worked anywhere where there is a close interface where our guests can actually be part of how marine science, oceanographic marine science and related scientific activity is undertaken. And so for me, the unique element is that we are sincerely undertaking science And of course, we are sincerely working to provide an extraordinary experience with our guests, as Nikki mentioned in her opening remarks. And the uniqueness is bringing this together, an expression of working world.
Okay, thank you. And I realized that we could ask questions all day long. I'm going to ask another question, at least one more, but I also want to let our guests have an opportunity to, kind of buttonhole you all with questions. But before we start going into that, Nikki, because we haven't heard from you that much yet, and you're the guest star. Tell us your best wildlife story ever.
So we were talking about that before, and there's a lot of cute encounters, obviously, especially with the penguins, which I think everybody would agree are some of the cutest animals on the planet, just the way that they walk, the way that they behave. But I think if you're looking for a moment that stands out, we had an encounter with humpback whales, so more specifically a mother and a calf that came quite close to the ship. And at the beginning, we were all very excited watching the humpback whales and, happy about that encounter, obviously, before we realized that they were actually taking shelter next to our ship and that they were actually being hunted by some orcas that were in the vicinity. So the mother was breathing very, very heavily, and obviously they've been chased for quite a long time already. And she had a little calf with her. So, just to realize how harsh the environment is as well. You'll be seeing the beauty of Antarctica, but you'll also be seeing that rawness that is out there, that is, the wilderness of Antarctica. And obviously, as soon as the ship moved on to its further destination, we weren't there to see what was happening, but you can just imagine that in the end, the orcas probably would have, done what they needed to do as well to survive. And that's what it is in the end. It's a fight for survival. And you'll see that everywhere you go. You'll see the little chicks, the penguin chicks coming out of the eggs, and that is just magical. But you'll also see the other side of things. And so it is a full circle that you come along. And that being said, people always ask what's a great time to come to Antarctica. And there is, again, no bad time for it because you're going through the circle of life. So as you're coming at the very beginning of the season, you see the penguins arriving, you see them, courtship. You see the eggs starting to show, you see the little ones starting to show, they're growing bigger. So no matter what time of the season you come to Antarctica, there's always so much there and so much to see. And one of the things that you have to kind of learn, I think, because at the beginning you arrive and you want to see everything, you want to climb the mountain, go like left and right and up and down, and time is running short and you're running back and you just want to see everything like we do. We're so used in our day-to-day life, being hectic and time is of the essence. But you really need to sit down and just watch and observe, as Damon was saying, because there's so much happening and so many little things that you otherwise miss, and so many mannerisms and so many characteristics that when you're just taking 1,000 photos, you just miss what is right in front of you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And the viewers can't see this, but I'm looking at the faces of the other three gentlemen on this episode, and they're all just vigorously nodding when Nikki is talking. They all, they all have made this experience. But Heather, we need you to give the floor to our viewers, and we're going to do our very best answering any questions that may be out there. We hope we have whetted a lot of appetites for Antarctica and for Svalbard and for the Great Lakes.
You certainly have. Thank you, Joost. The questions are coming in very quickly. Our first one, I think this is going to be a question for Jørn. It's from Diane in the United States, and she'd like to know what system will be used to determine which guest will be able to use which watercraft. She says it seems that the number of guests who get to use the submersibles might be a little bit limited.
Yes, thank you. That's a very relevant question because we have 378 guests on board. That's the maximum number of people on board the ship, and any one of our assets cannot obviously take all in one go. So we have to distribute and we have to sectionize, and all the guests booking a voyage on the expedition ship will be divided into groups, smaller groups. They will be dedicated to the group leader amongst the expedition team, and we will have group sessions where we talk about activities and icebreakers and educational snippets, meeting on deck, and so on. So these groups have a very functional, are very functional because they're also going to be the sort of the main framework of how we compose who's doing what at which time. So a group of around 30 people is 3 groups is about between 90 and 100 people. And in Antarctica going ashore, we have a guideline or a legal requirement that we cannot have more than 100 people ashore at any one time. So we will communicate group-wise, but also individually, and you will be able to use a device or your device, and we'll reach out to you via this device or via the TV system in your stateroom, and make sure that you're continuously up to date on the program, which we update from our expedition program coordinator and his assistant. His assistant is being hands-on, keeping everybody up to speed on the going on board the ship. So there will obviously also be screens dotted around the interior of the ship, so that you can in any time be fully updated on what your schedule, because the schedule will be to a certain degree individual depending on what your interests are, and you sign up and then automatically your individual schedule is being created, and it's based on what activities we're offering on that particular day. So you can either choose to shove your cell phone in the drawer, close it, and bring it out for a fortnight later, or you can use your device to be updated. That's your choice, and we will at any time be able to reach out to you. We're also aiming for a silent ship, so we won't bother you with PA announcements and ding-dongs throughout your voyage, because silence to us is a serene and of high quality. It's a quality of travel to these isolated regions. We want you to listen for bird sounds, the breath of whales, the cracking of icebergs, the swells to an isolated beach, and so on. And we don't want to bother you with ding-dongs from PA as much as possible. So that's why we have created a whole suite of ways reaching out, communicating the program to you.
Thank you, Jørn. Question from Jeremy in Nuneaton. He says, what sort of thing can we expect to see from the submersibles? So what kind of marine life or fish or wildlife?
That's a question for our resident underwater man, and that's also Damon Stanwell-Smith, who's probably spent more time under Antarctic ice in the water than any other person alive.
Oh yes, with an announcement like that, I have to caveat that. Certainly, I've certainly in the early parts of my career, I did spend a lot of time underwater working with the British Antarctic Survey. But thank you for the question. And thinking about what you see underwater, Can I just clarify, Heather, was it specifically Antarctica or just generally?
He actually didn't specify, but I would assume Antarctica.
Okay, so I'll cover off both if you like. Firstly, in Antarctica, it's a monochrome world above the ice. We see blacks and greys and whites, but underwater is a riot of colour. So there is, to paint a verbal picture of what you see, that the sea beds are covered in sponges and in a variety of echinoderms. So that's the starfishes or sea stars and sea urchins and holothurians and so on, and sea cucumbers and things, and all bright, bright colours. And the key when you're going down in a submersible is you're going to have the darkening of the light as you go down, down, down. And depending on the time of the season we're there, there will be a certain amount of organic matter in the blooms that come from plankton at times, that of course the whales and the penguins and the krill will eat. So sometimes it will be getting dark as you go down relatively rapidly. And as you descend down, the bright lights on the submersible will then light up extraordinary seabed scenes. And the key disruptor under the water is ice. So where icebergs have scoured, you'll see the great gouges where ice has gone through, and it can be of extraordinary power. And then where it hasn't gouged, there'll be amazing biotic life. The other extraordinary thing is that if the visibility, when the visibility is better, is that you have this feeling that you're suspended in amazing waters where it's almost you get vertigo looking to see so far with the lights, or indeed with ambient light. An image that just came up that James just showed, also actually just touching upon the submersibles, is the type of submersible that we're operating, which is a Dutch brand called U-Boat Works, and it's called a Cruise 7 submersible, 7 being 6 guests and 1 pilot. And we have 4 of them, 2 on each of our vessels. You'll see that they're appropriately yellow. I mean, could we have a color of any other type of sub than a yellow one? And right now they're being tested. These are our subs. These are real images of our subs being tested. They've been tested to 1,000 feet depth to make sure that they're sea trials, as Jørn mentioned. And they are a sophisticated way. They're electrically powered. They have 96 hours of air, I believe, on board. So we're doing much shorter trips than that. They're very safe and very well designed. And we have redundancy because there's 2 submersibles. And indeed, there is other technology on the ship, a very substantial remote operated vehicle, as well as a safety device as well. So we're running a safe and sophisticated submersible operation, which, with the capacity of having the multiple subs, will it also enable all guests to go and experience, for anyone that wants to go underwater. To go more broadly, what we might see, so I'm maybe just touching upon Antarctica, but then more broadly, the waters in remote places around the world will inevitably have both amazing wildlife, but also the remnants of where humans have pushed themselves a bit far. Specifically, I'm thinking of shipwrecks. And so the submersibles will also be an extraordinary tool to be able to go and have a look at shipwrecks in the locations that we're visiting as well. Sitting in the acrylic bubble, which has the same refractive index as water. So when you're sitting in that bubble, you can't really see the glass. It's just like you're suspended in the water. In 2 banks of 3 with rotating blocks of seats to be able to point to wherever the submersible is looking. And of course, again, just like with the kit, you need the people as well. We also have a team of highly trained submersible pilots who will be taking you down and providing guiding and helping you interpret and enjoy the scenes. As a marine scientist, this is the bit that I find is just excitement off the scale, and also is genuine novelty. That the opportunities for people, for non-professional specialists or naval personnel and so on, to be able to go down, we're talking about going to 1,000 feet, up to 1,000 feet underwater to explore these places, is as close to proper exploration as anybody's going to be getting. And as I mentioned earlier, the opportunities also for genuine novelty. I think that it's obviously not a guarantee, but I'd say that it's likely that on certainly every season and maybe every voyage, we'll be seeing things that are new to science. And for that, so to be able to say that, it gives me hairs on the back of the neck that this is the opportunity that our guests are going to be able to experience.
Wonderful, thank you, Damon. A question for Joost now. We've got quite a lot of these questions coming in from guests who are booked, and they're asking, when will the excursions be available to book on My Viking Journey for both Antarctica and the Great Lakes in 2022?
Okay, yeah, I can address that. So a lot of the experiences, and this is something I was thinking about when we were talking about the kayak and when we were talking about the submersible. A lot of these things that we offer free of charge. Actually, the vast majority of experiences are free of charge. And the way it will work with all of these outdoor activities is we will provide you with a questionnaire before you travel to give us an indication of your interests. And then we will start to book you into our system. And so an awful lot of the experiences we will provide to everyone. Not always on the same day of the voyage, but we will make sure that everyone gets a turn, if you will. And then if people are really particularly interested, for instance, in doing more kayaking, that will be an opportunity, that will be a possibility as well. In as much as we have bookable excursions, those will be available about 60 days out. The booking window is a little shorter. And that has just everything to do with, we have plenty of inventory. We don't run into things that we sometimes have on ocean vessels where we're just, there are certain experiences that where you can only have a handful of them. And there's a bit of scarcity sometimes. We will have far less of that on the expedition ship. It's an even smaller vessel than our ocean vessels. And so the lead time that we require to schedule everything are not as long as on the ocean vessels, and therefore the excursions will be available a little closer in.
Thank you, Joost. This is a question probably for Jørn, I believe. We've had quite a few of these as well regarding clothing. So they would like to know, will Viking be providing snow boots and snow coats? And if so, will they then be able to keep these after their expedition?
That is a great question, especially to ask on Norwegian, I guess. Yes. It's a very short answer, and we will provide a parka and an insulated layer, puff insulating layer, both produced by Helly Hansen and modified to our request with regards to where we have a patch, your group patch, and we have been very careful specifying it to be protecting our guests from salt water, sprays, wind on shore, so certain water tightness, windproofness, and protection, especially around the neck and head. Very good hoods, and they're possible to close and become very watertight, combined with an insulating layer that can be used standalone. For example, if you're in your stateroom and just want to dash out to take a look at the whale or the polar bear, you take on the insulating layer and you're pretty good to begin with. So these are garments that you, together with a waterproof pant and a specially developed pair of gumboots or neoprene expedition gumboots that are also specially developed for Viking because they have a special shaft height to prevent you from getting wet when you get out of the Zodiac at the beach. They have a special traction or sole pattern underneath to give you the best possible traction, and they have interfaces to equipment like skis and snowshoes and so on, stuff that we would have for your amusement when you're on snow-covered ground. We also have hiking sticks or trekking poles that we will have ready for your use when you arrive at the beach. So you take the Zodiac from the ship to shore, you disembark, and you'll find an expedition leader that is going to introduce you to the place, give you a quick brief, tell you where to pick up the trekking poles, and off you go to have your fantastic Antarctic experience. So trekking poles, windproof pants, rubber boots, they will all be available and delivered to your stateroom upon arrival to the ship. The same will be the Helly Hansen Viking Expedition parka, plus the insulating layer. Those two you're allowed, obviously, to keep. You pack it and bring it home and enjoy it wherever you go on your next expedition. And it's a memento that will keep on reminding you of your great voyage. So two things to keep. The other things we make available on the ship for you to use during the voyage.
Thank you, Jørn. I think this next question is one for Nikki. Bob in Chicago would like to know if you can tell us any more about the locations where we're planning to make landfall on the Antarctic Adventure expedition. And then linked to that, Charles in Glastonbury in the United States is asking how the excursions will work during those 7 days of exploring Antarctica. Will there be different things that they will book in advance?
Thank you very much. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, there is quite a complex system in Antarctica with regards to where we will go. And you will find that in your brochure, it doesn't actually specify the exact place where we will be making landfall, because no one can know right now where that's going to be. So there is a system in place where, in fact, we will be booking certain sites that we would like to visit. And there's various criteria that we're looking at when we are doing those bookings. This system is in place in order to not overpopulate sites, to make sure that we are the only persons that are going ashore at that place, that we're not two ships at the same time in the same place. So there's a lot of regulations in Antarctica that make sure that Antarctica remains as pristine as it is, and that gives you, of course, as well, that experience of being the only people down there. So we will be seeing ships passing by, but we will be never landing in the same area that another ship is landing. So that being said, we will be making a plan as to where we intend to go. We're trying to be away from the mainstream tourists. We'd like to go to places that are more remote and maybe not to be encountering even so many ships passing by even. So just to give you a bit more of the feeling of being remote and being the only people and being the exploring people down there in Antarctica. The schedule will change, and it will change until the very last minute, and it will still change as we're during the voyage. So I will not be able to pinpoint any particular place that we would like to see, that we'd like to visit, because yeah, it will change, and each and every voyage will be different as well in terms of where we can go. It will be ice dependent, it will be weather dependent, current dependent. There are so many factors that determine where you can go and where you can't go at that particular moment. But rest assured, Antarctica is such a special place. The wildlife is there. whether you go to this side or to that side, the penguins are waiting for you. So that is a given, and that is a guarantee, and that is the beauty of Antarctica, that the landscape is there, the penguins are there, the wildlife is there waiting for you, and it will, you know, no matter where we end up going, it will be an amazing trip.
And Heather, maybe to just add to that, I think this helps for the understanding of, you know, because I know that those are the kind of questions, you know, what is my experience going to be like? You have 22 people on the ship whose sole purpose it is to make sure that what you experience is stellar. We have 378 people on the ship. We will make 378 individual, stellar, unforgettable experiences. And that's the only thing we need those 22 people for. That's their mission. Every journey, that's their mission.
Yeah. And also not to forget that the cruise being on the ship is an experience in Antarctica by itself, because the ship is an amazing vantage point to see the landscape unfolding around you. So you've got your staterooms with these Nordic balconies that, you know, are an excellent viewing platform. And as you're cruising from one place to another, I mean, we've got people that will be up all night, basically, just not wanting to go to bed because there's just so much amazing scenery passing by all the time. And, you know, you might want to go to bed, you're looking outside, you see another whale below, and wildlife is everywhere to be seen. Great scenery is all over. And so the cruising itself, the being on the ship, is part of the experience as well. So as much as landing is, as much as the rib cruises, just being on the ship and looking out as much as you can is the key.
Heather, did we lose you?
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you for that. A question now for Aaron on the Great Lakes trip. So a couple of people are asking, will the submersibles be used during those cruises? And then we also have a question from Pat, who's going on 2 Great Lakes expeditions next year. She'd like to know, will there be any opportunities for observing the night sky with any telescopes on board?
Those are great questions. Thank you, Heather. In terms of the submersible question, at this point, we have some great sites picked out in Canadian waters on the Canadian side of the Great Lakes to use the submersibles with passengers during a day. On the American side of the border, there are some restrictions that limit us from bringing passengers into the subs, although I do know that our science partners are very keen to see the subs in the water and take advantage of having those subs there. So obviously we might need to put some people in to ballast those subs while we do the scientific work. That would be a safety situation I think we could convince US authorities of. So that's what we're working on. I just blew the whole game there by admitting it live on TV here. Whoops. But the subs, yes, we'll have them. Not as extensively used on the Great Lakes as we would say down in the Antarctic, but we still have some great sites chosen, and our sub pilots have been reviewing the bathymetric data on the Great Lakes to find the optimal sites for us, and keeping an eye looking at local records of shipwrecks and so on. I think there's over 7,000 shipwrecks on the Great Lakes. And the second question, Heather, if you can refresh, I got excited about submersibles.
Yes, so Pat was asking, will there be any telescopes on board to
Yes.
look at the night sky above the Great Lakes?
That's a great question, Pat. And the night sky on the Great Lakes, especially as we get away from, we're often in close passing by some quite populated areas, and to get out onto the Great Lakes, we will get into those sort of, undesignated dark sky preserves. We haven't finalized details to have telescopes on the ships. We'll have spotting scopes, and I think we've had some discussions with the night sky gazing. We haven't finalized those details, but I have seen some communication about it. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see something like that once you get to the Great Lakes in the spring.
Thank you, Aaron. A couple of questions now, I think, for Damon on the science side. So Phil from the United States is saying, is it possible to volunteer specifically for some of the scientific studies being carried out on board? For example, Phil has got a background in biochemistry and a PhD. We've also got Stephen in Boston who's saying, is there any opportunity for Viking Expedition guests to acquire university educational credits for participating in onboard seminars or off-ship science excursions?
So I think the short answer is yes, and then unfortunately no, but to expand on that. So delighted that we have a postgraduate biochemist enthusiastic about our science. It's music to my ears. In terms of the specificity of getting involved, on every voyage there will be a suite of different research projects being undertaken, and we're looking to ensure that the different tools that are available are being optimized so that there's a range of different scientific activities, or should we say research activities being undertaken, field work and indeed lab work. Specifically on biochemistry, there is the automated oceanographic instrumentation in the what's called the ferry box system, which is the automated instruments, which will be providing a range of chemical-based sampling, and indeed there will be the opportunity to undertake on specific work there. In terms of how that is going to be booked, it's the types of work. So we're looking at field work in a laboratory, or field work off the Zodiac, or field work from the RIB and so on, as opposed to at a project level. However, one of the fun things about being on an expedition, of course, is that there is a relatively small group of people that you get to know. Our resident scientists, the research scientists on board, will be very approachable. And I have no doubt, with your enthusiasm to talk about biochemistry, to find the relevant scientist on board who probably is most closely aligned with your interests, that would be where a conversation might start about how to then book a lab experience to come to interface with that given scientist. The second question is about university credits, and at the moment we don't have a plan because the quality assurance associated and the teaching of this is something I've previously been involved with university credits in field scenarios, is quite challenging. Typically, it is usually a vocational experience. So what an individual institution may or may not decide to do to show some form of appreciation of what you have done is very kind of institution specific. The scientists that are going to be on board, which is not quite the same as the guest experience, will be quite a lot of them working towards their graduate studies, early career scientists, maybe doing PhDs, postdocs, that kind of thing. But at the moment, we don't have a plan that guests would be gaining credits, should that be something they'd be looking to do. The final thing, to be on an optimistic note, though, is that individual institutions, in my previous experience, including prestigious entities around the world, are typically much more approachable than one might originally think if you're looking to have something innovative that you're describing what you are actually experiencing. Given that the paradigm that I was waxing lyrical about earlier, about the uniqueness of what we're looking to do with rigorous science combined with guest experience, I think the novelty of that may intrigue academic institutions. And if you have a specific one that you are working towards a degree on, I would encourage, at the very least, having a conversation with whoever is dealing with the matriculation of a given course to explore whether or not that is possible. I have seen that in terrestrial expeditions or coastal expeditions in the past, when at first glance that would not be possible.
Thank you, Damon. A couple of questions coming in about the ships now, so I'll just throw this out to whoever knows the most. So we've got Bryn, who's asking about the shows and entertainment on board. Helen, who'd like to know if there is a spa. And then we've got Scott in Chicago, who is asking if you could please tell him a bit more about the areas, the hide and the shelter.
I'll take that. Yes, there is a spa, and it's just as brilliant as on our ocean ships. And it has a few features that we don't have on our ocean ship. One is a Norwegian badestamp, and you'll have to book our cruise to understand exactly what that is. But as you may know from our ocean vessels, we infuse our spa experience with a lot of Nordic traditions, and the badestamp is one of those. And as far as the entertainment is concerned, we have a somewhat because the ship is somewhat smaller and the emphasis is a little different. We have a somewhat scaled down, appropriate for the ship selection of entertainment that is going to focus largely on live music. We will have our classical music that many of our guests know from the living room. We have the guitarist that plays in various different venues, and we have decided to make it all relatively portable, if you will. We have various different smaller venues on the ship that we want to bring music to. And then in the aula, we will have some surprises that we can't really talk about yet. And finally, Heather, there was one other element about the
hide and the shelter.
Oh, the hide and the shelter. Well, the hide is a little bit of a mysterious space that you will just need to discover when you're on board. And we like it that way. The shelter is, if you will, an indoor-outdoor space. It's open to the elements, but we can still keep it because it's somewhat protected. We can still keep it relatively, even in Antarctica or in Svalbard, we can keep it relatively well temperature controlled. We have blankets there, and it's a perfect space to look out, and it's a perfect space to wander out a little bit. It has on the sides, it has two openings out to the deck. It's the perfect place to sit and just watch the scenery go by and watch wildlife. And if you've ever been on one of our river ships, it's kind of the hallmark Viking idea of having indoor and outdoor spaces that are relatively fluent. This is excellent, James. This is a picture of the aft of the ship. This is the Finse terrace. So weather permitting, and even if it's a little nippy, you have blankets, and the seats have some heating in them on the Finse terrace, so that you can experience Antarctica or Svalbard or the Great Lakes in the great outdoors. I think we've pioneered on the rivers these great outdoor spaces. We've then done it on ocean, and we're doing it on expedition as well, because as we promise you, we will take you into the destination. We're all about you seeing Antarctica. We're all about you seeing Svalbard or the Great Lakes. We're not about keeping you enclosed in the ship. No shopping malls, no casinos, none of the things that distract you from what you came to see. And the outdoor spaces are such an integral element of that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joost. We've got quite a few people watching who are going on the Polaris from the Arctic to the Antarctic journey. So we're just wondering if you could possibly talk a little bit about the experience in the Arctic and what type of wildlife they can expect to see on that first part of the journey. Maybe one for Jørn.
Yes, that is for Jørn.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's a very relevant question. I am from the Arctic myself, born and spent decades far into the Arctic Circle. If you embark on that voyage, if you embark on the loop that goes up to Svalbard, we have a couple of pictures of Svalbard ready to go here. You will move from the startup port of Tromsø, which is the Norwegian Arctic capital, where I'm from. That was a starting point for many an epic expedition up to the Arctic. And it will have a little bit of a sail across the North Sea and into the Arctic Ocean, where we will hit Svalbard, which is an archipelago very far north, between 74 and 80 degrees north. And that is an archipelago consisting of a number of islands, but in combination, that area is covered 60% by glaciers. And as you can see in this image, we will come into fjords where the glacier walls are going straight into the fjord, and they're heavily crevassed. And from the safety of our expedition ship, we will be able to observe the grandiose landscape that where you in the valleys and into the fjords, you have these glaciers flowing like rivers into the ocean. It's alpine landscape, and you could see one of the images with a mountain with a grassy slope below. As you can see here, this is actually one of the largest, on distance, largest bird cliffs in Svalbard. One of the ways to identify a bird cliff in a high Arctic area is to look for a grassy slope. And if you see the vertical cliff, some places it's slightly lighter. That's bird guano. And that bird guano is actually marine life that is brought on land by seabirds that are nesting throughout the summer on ledges in the vertical cliff here. So this is a 3,000 feet cliff straight into the ocean with some grassy slopes below, and they fertilize actually the slopes below with guano. So that is the seabirds in this area is the biggest agent for bringing fertilization from the ocean and on land. So look for fantastic alpine landscape, grassy slopes. There's a bird cliff, and there's also a little image of a white dot in white landscape here. And obviously this is the big highlight. What you're looking for is something camouflaged. It has a little bit more yellowish fur to it. It has a black nose and black eyes and tiny ears. So this is a young polar bear, and those are the most efficient predators on Earth. A very young, in terms of species, it's derived from the brown bear. It started hunting on ice and followed north when the ice retracted from the last ice age. So we're talking about a species about 100 to 200,000 years old, and they're no carnivores. They can eat everything, but they do prefer seals, whales, and the carnivore diet, if you like. So these are really fierce predators, and we might see them walking across the sea ice in a fjord looking for ringed seals, which is their favorite. So the polar bear is always a huge tick, and in Svalbard there are about 3,000 polar bears. There's about 2,500 people and about 2,750 snowmobiles. So this is a very particular area. It's a treaty area where Norway has its sovereignty, and it's our crown jewel in the Arctic landscape, so to speak.
Wonderful, thank you, Jørn. Another question, I think, for Damon here. This one's from Shelton in Silver Spring in the United States. And he says, can you tell us about some of the steps that Viking has taken to make sure we reduce our human footprint on nature when we're traveling to these beautiful places?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the question. Again, another very relevant question. If we were to break down how to completely minimize our footprint, let's start with the ship. Inevitably, when you're traveling long distances, you have a ship that has to move around. And so, first of all, we are absolutely looking to minimize the emissions from the vessel. So we have an incinerator that has a 0 emissions from it. We have a very, very efficient hull. The ship is long and slender, like a frigate, or which makes a very efficient hull in terms of the fuel burning to push the vessel around, and has a good hull speed, so she can move the water fast as well. As Jørn touched upon, she's stable as well, and in fact stability even is part of efficiency, because if you can go where you want to go, then you can reduce in every way. You can make the long distance voyaging efficient. Then related to that is the ships are classified, DNV classified Silent E, which is the technical classification, which means that they are very, very quiet in the water. One of the challenges with a lot of shipping is that ships make noise underwater. And so again, we wanted to make sure that when we have vessels that are moving into remote places, that we're not impacting in terms of negative human impact in terms of sound as well. So functionally silent up to 11 knots. So when we're actually in places that we'll be moving around more slowly and serenely during the days, we'll be moving very, very quietly through the water. Jørn mentioned about silence as another aspect as well, which actually, when you're in a very quiet area, having a vessel with pings and noises and so on in the surface as well is another area where, by being serene and quiet, will be good for wildlife watching, but it is also environmentally very sensible to be doing. And then we briefly touched upon the ship. And then if you look at how the ship and the people on it interface with the remote places is the big one, in my view, and that is about maintaining biosecurity. As humans move around the planet, we inevitably have a risk of bringing pathogens from one place to another. And if the last couple of years has taught us anything about how that happens, we've all been sensitized to the principles of biosecurity. But it's not unique to COVID. It's something that is an issue with farming and has been for many years. And as both scientists and also just generally society has become more aware of the challenge of pathogens moving around, and basically any biotic material that moves rapidly from one place to another potentially has a challenge. And we have put great stock into making sure that we have state of the art, the gold standard for biosecurity. And so that will, from a guest point of view, will mean a very profound, literally cleaning of items that when going ashore, as we're heading south to Antarctica and north to the Arctic, for example, but it really matters from really going from any one place to another. There are processes to clean your boots when you're interfacing from when you're stepping on the shore to being on the ship. And we're using both very important, very good biocides that are also biodegradable, that are also very effective, and we're also having processes designed to ensure that our biosecurity is as tight as it can be. And in a changing world, biosecurity is, as we go forward, going to be continue to be that challenge. And so that is, if you like, another facet of how we want to absolutely minimize the human impact. And then the third element is about ensuring that we're not just obeying the letter, but the spirit of the environmental regulations that exist in remote places. In polar regions, both in the Arctic and the Antarctic, there are specific sets of rules and regulations. And so we as a company are very proactively engaged in the cooperative bodies that are used, that have for many years now collectively worked together to protect remote wildernesses. In Antarctica, that is IATO, which is the International Association of Antarctica Tour Operators. And we get involved in making sure that the process is that not just ourselves, but all our peers, all our, if you like, our friendly competitors. We cooperate from a safety and an environmental responsibility point of view, but also it is beholden on the entire sector to ensure that we're not just trying to do the minimum, that we say, what can we do to go beyond? And then the same also in the Arctic with ACO, I have to ask Jørn, who is a co-founder of ACO. Can you remind me, please, of the ACO acronym?
Association of Arctic Expedition Tour Operators.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, I should know that. But from ACO as the, if you like, the sister body to IATO, is about making sure that everything is run safely and environmentally responsibly in the Arctic. And then in the Great Lakes area, our partnership with NOAA, who have a statutory responsibility to work on the conservation of the Great Lakes, certainly on the US side, that taking advice and ensuring that that we're both adhering to the spirit and the letter of environmental responsibility in the Great Lakes as well. So, if you like, that's a flavour of the elements we're doing, and I'm very proud of the way that we as a company are taking this very seriously, as one would hope. But it's not about doing the minimum. It's saying, what can we do to be as good as we can to ensure that all of us, it's not just the guests versus the crew or whatever, us collectively, what can we collectively do when we're on an expedition to absolutely minimize any sort of negative human impact.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Damon. Just to probably finish now, we've got quite a few questions about different destinations we might go to in the future. So I'll just put this out to everyone, whether we might eventually consider perhaps the Canadian Maritime and the Canadian Arctic, the Galapagos, the Amazon, the Congo, or the Zambezi. Any ideas on those?
Any place where we can bring the ship and where we have something interesting to show, but these things always take a little bit of time. We kind of have this maxim that we don't do something until we can do it well. So we're not going to try very rapidly to cover the entire planet. We're first going to perfect what we have, and then we'll continue on. I think we will not be going to the Zambezi River anytime in the next 2 years or so. But gentlemen, chime in. Nikki, chime in. What are other great places to go?
Canadian Arctic, Greenland, Iceland, so many. You can go tropical.
South America, South Georgia, there's so many places. And yeah, as Joost said, the ship is fantastically equipped to go to remote places, and our itineraries will evolve and expand as we move forward.
And I would jump in and say we do have a fantastic taster of the Canadian Maritime provinces as we do as we enter into the Great Lakes. We sail from New York through Eastern Canada, through the Gulf of St. Lawrence and up to St. Lawrence Seaway and onto the Great Lakes. And that really, on that voyage, the itinerary planning team have selected some fantastic stops to showcase Eastern Canada and the Maritime provinces. So that was, I think, the first place you mentioned, Heather, and so I'm excited to say we are going there, and we hope to expand our visitation to that region as time goes.
That's awesome. Thank you, everyone. Well, I think that's all the questions we've got time for tonight. We do have a few more specific ones, but we'll certainly try to get back to those people on email, I'm sure, in the next few days, if you guys all don't mind sending me over some answers. But thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for watching at home, and we'll hope to see you here again soon.